Well, it's 6:45 on Anzac Day 2025. I've just been to the dawn service at Engadine and packed, absolutely packed, so many people there. And it was a reminder to me of just how important this day and these traditions are to Australians. And I went up with my daughter and watched the service, took part. And I was reminded by my wife later that it's 10 years to the day that I was actually in Turkey at Gallipoli with my school as part of the New South Wales kind of Premier Scholarship. We took 100 students over to watch the 100th anniversary, which was an amazing experience. I think I've got a bunch of videos there on my channel if you want to see some of those. But it also kind of made me think about the tradition of Anzac, what it means and why so many young people were there, and how as a nation we could have these really interesting kind of ideas. Like if you think about Anzac and what normally happens there, it's this real kind of change. So we have this really solemn service, which is often like we had the Anglican minister there. There was a recessional hymn. There's the minute silence, and so there's this really solemn service. And then at 10 a.m, the RSL has tour, and we have alcohol being served much earlier in the day. And often, because this Anzac Day is a Friday, I expect that many Australians will drink heavily and get drunk today, and they'll be gambling. And many of them will say it's kind of in the Anzac spirit, to the point where yesterday on the radio, I was listening to, I think it was the day before actually, I was listening to James Valentine talking about an RSL, I think in North Sydney, that had cancelled tour, had said they didn't think it was in keeping with kind of what they were trying to do, and many of the families or veterans had asked for it not to happen. And it was quite controversial. You had people ringing up saying, I don't think that's the case, where we're kind of living the spirit of those original Anzac soldiers who played tour. So it's a well-known fact that some of them did. And he had Tim Costello on, who's the anti-gambling advocate, a World Vision CEO as well at one point. And he made the point that many of the Anzac soldiers were Protestants, which means in 1915, gambling was a sin. And in fact, the culture for those Protestants would most certainly have not been heavily into gambling, which was an interesting thought. He claims that kind of the gambling industry in Australia was using the history of the Anzacs to kind of normalise gambling. And I do wonder how many Australian children have been there with fathers and grandfathers and watched gambling take place, watched tour occur. He said the industry was saying that they were, like, Australians thought of themselves as gamblers, and that was kind of helping them out as an industry, this idea. And what else? That other Vietnam, China, various other countries, they thought of themselves as gamblers as well. Wasn't that unique a concept? But that he felt that history was being used for that purpose. And it kind of reminded me, it made me think about the fact that history is so alive today. That here we are, here's a radio segment, Anzac Day is coming up, and we've got people calling in, people getting angry, others really reflecting and thinking about men who lived 110 years ago, and what they thought and what they believed, and what impact that should have on our culture now. That's an interesting thought, isn't it? The fact that they're having arguments and challenging each other on positions and on the purposes of history. And it just shows you, as we think through what history is and the purpose of history, it shows you the power of history to shape the kind of discourse of Australian society today. This idea that, well, this and this occurred a long time in the past, and that should actually kind of have an impact on what's happening now. That the traits that these men had, whether they believed gambling was a sin, whether they took part in gambling on the beaches, at Gallipoli should actually come to a point where the RSL in Sydney should be criticised for deciding not to have gambling or tour taking part in their services for Anzac. I thought to myself, I wonder how many other countries in the world have something like this occurring. And I think if you have a look, you'd see that most countries have something like this. That the past has such an impact on us, on our country, on who we are as people, who we believe we are, what it means to be Australian, what it means to be a Wimble or whatever you are. It just shows that history is such a powerful idea because it builds up identity. And so many people are always asking themselves, who am I? How am I supposed to act? How am I supposed to be in this world that we're living in?